My wife moved her family into my house, then tried to give my home to my in-laws. I never thought I'd become a stranger in my own home. The place I'd spent years saving for, renovating with my own hands, and filling with memories, was suddenly not mine anymore. But that's what happens when you let your guard down with people who see kindness as weakness. It all started 3 months ago with a phone call that woke us at 2 a.m. My wife, Elena, answered with a groggy, "Hello?" before suddenly sitting bolt upright in bed, fully alert. I watched her face transform from confusion to shock, then settle into a grim determination I'd rarely seen before. "Oh my God! Are you both okay?" Yes, of course," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "We'll figure something out." When she hung up, I already knew what was coming. Her parents' rental home had a major pipe burst, flooding the entire first floor and making it uninhabitable. Insurance would cover it eventually, but repairs would take weeks. "They have nowhere to go, Mark," Elena said, her brown eyes wide and pleading. "Just for a few weeks until the repairs are done. Please?" I hesitated. My relationship with my in-laws had always been cordial but distant. Elena's father, Richard, was a retired contractor who never missed a chance to point out what he considered flaws in our home, the home I'd worked on myself. Her mother, Vivian, was sweet enough but had a talent for reorganizing everything she touched to make it better. Still, they were family, and it was an emergency. "Of course they can stay," I said, squeezing Elena's hand. "Family helps family." The gratitude in her eyes made me feel like a hero. If only I'd known I was opening Pandora's box. Richard and Vivian arrived the next day with 4 large suitcases and enough toiletries to stock a small pharmacy. I helped them settle into our guest bedroom, the one we'd planned to turn into a nursery someday. "This room is awfully small," Richard commented as I brought in the last suitcase. "And that window, single pane? You're just throwing money away on heating." I bit my tongue. "It's temporary, remember? Just until your place is fixed up." He grunted in response, already measuring the walls with his eyes. The first week wasn't terrible. There were small irritations, the TV constantly tuned to game shows, finding my coffee replaced with decaf, the bathroom counter cluttered with unfamiliar creams and pills. But we managed. Elena seemed happier having her parents around, and I told myself that was worth the inconvenience. Then came the first red flag. I returned home from work to find my home office rearranged. My desk had been pushed against the wall, my filing cabinet moved to the garage, and a fold-out bed installed in the middle of the room. "What happened here?" I asked Elena, trying to keep my voice level. "Mom and Dad need more space," she explained, not quite meeting my eyes. "And you can work at the kitchen table, right? Just until they leave." I swallowed my frustration. "How long until the repairs on their place are done?" Elena suddenly became very interested in folding the laundry. "There's been a complication. The insurance is disputing some of the damage claims, so it might be a bit longer than we thought." "How much longer?" "Maybe a couple of months." I took a deep breath. "All right. But after that, they need to find somewhere else." "I need my office back, Elena." She nodded quickly. "Of course. Thank you for being so understanding." 2 weeks later, I came home to find a stranger sitting on my couch, feet up on my coffee table, drinking my imported beer. He was about 30, with a patchy beard and the kind of smile that immediately made me want to check if my wallet was still in my pocket. "Hey, bro!" he called out as if we were old friends. "Elena's still at the store. Beer's in the fridge if you want one." My beer. In my fridge. Being offered to me. "Who are you?" I asked, though I already had a sinking feeling I knew. "Greg, Elena's brother," he said, extending a hand that I reluctantly shook. "Thanks for letting me crash. The roommate situation was getting toxic, you know how it is." I didn't know. Elena had mentioned her younger brother occasionally, unemployed, moving from job to job, always with big plans that never materialized. But she'd never mentioned him coming to stay with us. When Elena returned, I pulled her into the kitchen while Greg helped himself to seconds from our fridge. "You didn't think to ask me before inviting your brother to live with us?" I whispered, trying to keep the anger from my voice. She had the decency to look embarrassed. "It was an emergency. His roommate kicked him out, and he had nowhere to go. Mom and Dad said it would be fine." "Your parents said it would be fine?" "This is our house, Elena. Ours. Not theirs." I know, she soothed, placing a hand on my arm. "It's just temporary. He's applying for jobs already. 2 months tops." I stared at her, suddenly seeing a side of my wife I'd never noticed before. 2 weeks, I countered. "Then he finds somewhere else." She nodded quickly. 2 weeks. "Thank you. You're the best husband." I should have known better. 2 weeks came and went. Greg was still there, now with a growing collection of gaming equipment set up in our living room. He'd borrowed my tools to fix things around the house that weren't broken. And somehow, he'd convinced Elena that the Wi-Fi password needed changing because our network was definitely being hacked. The new password? Greg's Castle 2023. One morning, I tried to log into our shared bank account to pay bills, only to find the password changed. When I asked Elena about it, she looked away. "Dad thought it would be easier if he helped with the finances while he's here. You're so busy with work, and he's retired." That was the moment I should have put my foot down. Instead, I tried reasoning with her. "Honey, I appreciate the help, but our finances are private. Your dad doesn't need access to our accounts." "Are you saying you don't trust my father?" she asked, her voice rising. "After everything he's done to help us?" Help us? What had he helped with? All I'd seen was him criticizing my home, reorganizing my garage, and apparently, taking over our finances. "That's not what I meant. You're being selfish, Mark." She cut me off. "This is what family does. We help each other. Maybe if you were more family-oriented, you'd understand that." Her words stung like a slap. I retreated to the kitchen, the only place that still felt somewhat mine, and wondered how my life had spiraled so quickly out of control. As I stood there, I heard laughter from the living room, Elena, her parents, and Greg, all together. A family unit that somehow no longer included me. What I didn't know then was that this was just the beginning. The uninvited guests weren't just moving into my house, they were moving me out. And my wife was helping them do it. By the 2-month mark, my home had become unrecognizable. The warm, comfortable space Elena and I had created together was now foreign territory where I needed permission to exist. It wasn't just about the physical changes, though there were plenty of those. It was about feeling like an intruder in the place I'd built with my own hands. My morning routine, once my sanctuary, became a gauntlet. The bathroom schedule now revolved around everyone else's needs. "Mark, could you shower at night instead?" Vivian had suggested with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It would be so much easier for everyone." Translation: get out of our way. Elena no longer made coffee for us both. Instead, I'd come downstairs to find the family already gathered around the kitchen table, coffee cups empty, breakfast dishes cleaned. "Oh, we didn't want to wake you," she'd say, though I'd been up at my usual time. One Saturday morning, I went to grab my toolbox from the garage to fix a squeaky hinge. It was gone. "Dad borrowed it," Elena explained. "He's helping Mr. Peterson next door with some shelving." I stood there, processing this. "He took my tools to help the neighbor? Without asking me?" Elena rolled her eyes. "It's just tools, Mark. Don't be so possessive. Just tools." The professional grade set I'd spent years collecting. The tools I used to build half the furniture in our house, including the dining table where her family now ate every meal without me. "When will he bring them back?" I asked. "When he's done with them," she replied, as if I was being ridiculous. "Stop making such a big deal about everything." Later that week, I tried to order a pizza using our joint credit card. Declined. I called the bank. "I'm sorry, sir," the representative said. But that card was reported lost and a replacement was sent to. She paused. It was sent to a different address than what I have on file for you. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. What address? When she told me, I recognized it immediately. It was Elena's parents' address, the house that was supposedly being repaired. That night, I confronted Elena in our bedroom, the only place we could still talk privately, though even that was changing, with Greg's things gradually appearing in our closet because he needed more space. Why was a replacement card sent to your parents' house? I asked. She didn't look up from her phone. Dad needed to pay for some materials for the repairs. It was just easier that way. Repairs for their house? The one they're supposedly unable to live in? Now she looked up, her expression hardening. Yes, Mark. The house they're fixing so they can get out of your precious space. The one you keep reminding them is temporary. I took a deep breath. Elena, this is our home. Not mine alone. Ours. And suddenly I feel like I have no say in what happens here. You're being dramatic, she snapped. My family is helping us. Greg fixed the garbage disposal last week. Greg broke the garbage disposal last week. I corrected her. I fixed it after he left. She tossed her phone aside. Why are you so against my family? What did they ever do to you except need a place to stay? I wanted to shake her, to make her see what was happening. Instead, I tried another approach. Remember when we first bought this place? How we stayed up all night painting the living room because we couldn't wait to see it finished? How we promised this would be our space, just ours. For a moment, something flickered in her eyes, recognition, maybe even guilt. But it vanished quickly. Things change, she said flatly. Family needs to stick together. We're family too, I said quietly. Or at least we were. She turned away without responding. The next day, I left for work early to avoid the morning circus. When I returned home, there were 3 unfamiliar cars in the driveway. I could hear laughter and music from inside, a party I hadn't been told about. I pushed open the door to find Greg standing at my grill on the back patio, spatula in hand, surrounded by people I'd never seen before. He was wearing my favorite shirt. Hey, the man of the house is home, he called out, and everyone turned to look at me. I'd never felt more uncomfortable in my own home. A young woman approached me, beer in hand. You must be Elena's husband. Greg has told us so much about this amazing place he's got now. My jaw tightened. Is that what he told you? That this is his place? She looked confused. Well, yeah. He said he's been fixing it up for months. The renovations look great. I scanned the room for Elena and found her in the corner, laughing with her parents and another couple. When our eyes met, she quickly looked away. Mark! Richard boomed, approaching with a drink, scotch from my private collection, I noticed. Come meet the Hendersons. They're thinking about redoing their kitchen, and I told them all about how we're planning to remodel this one in the spring. I stared at him. You're planning to remodel my kitchen? He clapped my shoulder hard enough to make me step back. Don't worry about the cost. We've got it all figured out. The contractor's a buddy of mine. My head was spinning. When had I agreed to a kitchen remodel? Why was Greg telling people this was his house? And why was Elena allowing all of this? I mumbled something about needing to change and retreated upstairs. Our bedroom door was locked. When I knocked, a stranger opened it, one of Greg's friends who'd been using the master bathroom, because the other one was occupied. That night, I slept in the guest room. No one seemed to notice. The final straw came 3 days later. I arrived home from work earlier than usual and found an unfamiliar car in the driveway. A middle-aged man in a button-down shirt was walking around the exterior of my house, clipboard in hand, measuring things and taking notes. Can I help you? I asked, approaching him. He looked up, surprised. Oh, hello. Just finishing up here. He extended his hand. Dave Wilkins, county property appraiser. The family didn't mention you'd be home early. A property appraiser? My blood ran cold. What exactly are you appraising my property for? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He consulted his clipboard. Standard valuation for the transfer filing. Nothing to worry about, just paperwork. Though I have to say, the place is in great shape. The market in this area is hot right now. Transfer filing. The words echoed in my head like a warning bell. Thank you for your time, I said, my mind already racing ahead. I'm sure everything is in order. As Dave drove away, I stood in my driveway, looking at the house that no longer felt like mine. Something was very wrong, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I was certain it wasn't accidental. My wife and her family weren't just taking advantage of my hospitality. They were taking my home. I couldn't sleep that night. The property appraiser's words kept replaying in my mind. Standard valuation for the transfer filing. What transfer? I hadn't agreed to any transfer. Part of me wanted to confront Elena immediately, but a deeper instinct held me back. If something underhanded was happening, tipping my hand too early would only make things worse. Instead, I decided to observe and gather information. I started paying closer attention to conversations that abruptly stopped when I entered rooms. I noticed the hushed phone calls Elena would take in the backyard. I saw the way Richard studied property listings on his tablet each morning, as if shopping for their next target. For 3 days I played dumb. I smiled through dinner as Greg described his plans for renovating the master bathroom. I nodded when Vivian mentioned how convenient it was that the place had so much equity built up. I pretended not to notice when Elena and her father had intense discussions over financial documents that disappeared the moment I approached. On the 4th day after meeting the appraiser, I left for work as usual but doubled back 20 minutes later, parking a block away and walking to the house. Through the kitchen window, I could see them all gathered at the dining table, Elena, her parents, and Greg, hunched over papers, talking animatedly. No one looked up as I slipped around to the back door and quietly let myself in. Just needs the county approval, and we're golden, Greg was saying. The clerk said 2 weeks tops. And you're sure there won't be any issues with the signatures? Elena asked, her voice tight with worry. Richard scoffed. The notary didn't look twice. Besides, we're family. If anyone asks, we'll say he gave verbal permission. I still think we should tell him, Elena said. At least after it's approved. He deserves to know. Tell him what? Greg laughed. That he doesn't own his precious house anymore? That'll go over well. He'll adjust, Vivian said soothingly. It's better for everyone this way. Your father and I can finally retire properly, you and Greg get security, and Mark, well, Mark will understand eventually. It's what families do. I retreated silently, my heart pounding. This wasn't just taking advantage, this was theft. I drove to work in a daze, unable to process the betrayal. The woman I'd built a life with was conspiring to steal my home. Our home. That afternoon, I called in sick for the rest of the day and went to see a lawyer. Stuart Grayson was an old college friend who specialized in property law. I explained my suspicions without going into full detail. I still had no proof, after all. Watch your mail, Stuart advised. If they've filed something with the county, there will be correspondence. And Mark. He hesitated. Don't confront them until you have solid evidence. Family property disputes get ugly fast. I spent the next week in a strange limbo, going through the motions of normal life while inwardly reeling. I smiled at breakfast. I made small talk with Richard about sports. I pretended not to notice when Greg borrowed my car without asking. All the while, I checked the mail the moment it arrived, my stomach knotting with dread each time. Then, on a rainy Tuesday it came. I was working from home that day, a rarity now, given how uncomfortable my house had become. Everyone else was out, Elena at work, her parents at some appointment, Greg wherever Greg went during the day. The mail carrier dropped off a stack of envelopes, and there it was, a thick manila envelope from the county clerk's office. The strange part? It was addressed to Gregory Williams, but with my last name, Parker. Gregory Parker. My address, but not his name. Not his family. My hands trembled as I held it. This was someone else's mail, technically. Opening it could be considered a federal offense. But it was my address, my name being usurped. I made my decision in seconds. I carried the envelope to the kitchen, filled a pot with water, and set it to boil. Using the steam, I carefully loosened the seal without tearing it. Then, holding my breath, I slid out the contents. The first page hit me like a physical blow. Deed of transfer, residential property. My address was listed at the top. Under current owner, my name appeared. Under new owner, Gregory Parker. I flipped through the pages, my vision blurring with rage and disbelief. There was my signature, forged, but convincingly so. The document had been notarized. There were bank statements, tax forms, everything needed to make the transfer appear legitimate. Most damning of all was a handwritten note from the county office. Final approval pending verification of relationship. Please provide marriage certificate for Elena Parker, née Williams, and Mark Parker to confirm family transfer exemption. They hadn't just been planning to steal my house, they had already set it in motion. They were waiting on one last document to complete the theft, using my marriage as the vehicle for fraud. I was carefully replacing everything in the envelope when I heard the front door open. I quickly sealed it as best I could and left it on the hall table with the other mail. Mark? You home? Elena called out. In the kitchen, I answered, surprised by how normal my voice sounded. My entire world had just collapsed, yet somehow I was still standing, still capable of speech. She appeared in the doorway, shopping bags in hand. You're still in your pajamas? It's almost noon. Not feeling great, I said, which wasn't a lie. I felt hollowed out, like someone had scooped away my insides and left just enough to maintain the appearance of a person. Well, don't get too comfortable, she said, setting down her bags. Mom and Dad want to take us all out to dinner tonight. Something to celebrate. What are we celebrating? I asked, already knowing the answer. She smiled, and I wondered how I'd never noticed how that smile didn't reach her eyes anymore. Just family stuff. You'll see. Family stuff. My house being stolen was family stuff, now. Sounds great, I said, forcing a smile of my own. I wouldn't miss it. As she turned to leave, she paused. Oh, did the mail come? Just bills, I lied. Nothing important. That night at dinner, I watched my wife and her family toast to new beginnings and family security, their glasses clinking as they exchanged knowing looks. I raised my glass with them, smiling wider than anyone at the table. They had no idea that the game had changed. I wasn't the clueless husband anymore. I knew exactly what they were doing, and I was already planning my response. The property transfer was pending county approval, which meant I still had time. Not much, but enough. Enough to make sure they regretted the day they decided to steal from me. The next morning, I called in sick to work again. Once everyone had left the house, I drove straight to Stuart's office, the manila envelope secure in my briefcase. This is... Stuart trailed off as he examined the documents, his professional composure slipping. Mark, this is criminal fraud. Multiple counts. He looked up, his expression grave. And your wife is clearly involved. Hearing it stated so plainly made my stomach twist. Despite everything, some irrational part of me had hoped there was an explanation, that Elena had been coerced or manipulated by her family. But the evidence in front of us told a different story. What do I do? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Stuart leaned back in his chair. You have options. We could file for an emergency injunction today, stop the transfer immediately. Have them served with papers by dinner. The image flashed through my mind, police at my door, Elena's face as she realized she'd been caught. It was tempting, but something held me back. What's my alternative? The longer game, Stuart said, studying me. We still freeze the transfer, but we do it quietly. Meanwhile, you gather more evidence, emails, conversations, bank records. Anything that shows intent and conspiracy. He hesitated. It's riskier, and you'd have to keep living with them, pretending you don't know. But the payoff? I asked. Total control of the situation. And a much stronger case if this goes to court, which it likely will, given what they've already attempted. I thought about it for less than a minute. Let's play the long game. Over the next 3 weeks, I became the perfect actor in the absurd theater of my life. By day, I was the same oblivious Mark, increasingly withdrawn but still compliant. By night, I was building my case with meticulous precision. I installed small cameras in the common areas of the house, legal in my state, since it was my property. I set up a separate email account and began documenting every strange financial movement, every odd conversation, every piece of mail that arrived addressed to Gregory Parker, or Richard Parker. Stewart filed the freeze on property transfers under my name, citing suspected fraud. He did it through a specialized division of the county clerk's office that handled sensitive cases, ensuring it wouldn't trigger any automatic notifications that might alert Elena or her family. The transfer is officially on hold, Stewart confirmed by phone one afternoon while I sat in my car outside a coffee shop. They'll need a judge's order to proceed, which they won't get. But they won't know that until they try to finalize it. And when will that be? I asked. Based on these documents? They're expecting approval next week. That's when things will get interesting. I used the time to secure my finances. I'd opened new accounts at a different bank, redirected my paychecks, and slowly began moving funds from our joint accounts. Not everything, just enough to build my safety net without raising alarms. I also hired a private investigator to look into Richard and Vivian's flooded house. The photos she sent me 2 days later confirmed what I'd begun to suspect. There was no flood damage, no construction, no repairs in progress. Their house was perfectly fine. They had simply wanted mine. The most difficult part was maintaining the charade with Elena. We'd been married for 6 years, built a life together, talked about having children. Had it all been a lie? Or had something changed along the way? At night, lying beside her in bed, I studied her sleeping face and tried to reconcile the woman I'd loved with the one who would steal everything from me. You've been quiet lately, she mentioned one evening as we got ready for bed. Is everything okay at work? Her concern seemed genuine, which only confused me more. How could she sound so caring while plotting behind my back? Just tired, I replied, the lie coming easily now. Big project coming up. She nodded, seemingly satisfied. Well, don't work too hard. We have that family meeting coming up next weekend. Dad wants to discuss some important things. I bet he does, I thought. Looking forward to it, I said aloud. The family meeting would likely be when they planned to reveal the property transfer, after it was supposedly finalized, when they thought it would be too late for me to do anything about it. They didn't know I'd be ready. 2 days before the scheduled meeting, I received an urgent call from Stewart. They tried to push the transfer through today, he said without preamble. Got denied, of course, because of our hold. But here's the interesting part. The clerk called to confirm the denial with me, and mentioned they seemed very confident. Almost smug. What does that mean? It means they might have a backup plan. Be careful, Mark. These people have already shown they're willing to commit serious fraud. Don't underestimate them. That night, I came home to find Richard, Vivian, Greg, and Elena huddled around the dining table again, papers spread out before them. They fell silent when I entered, faces arranged in unconvincing smiles. Mark, Richard boomed. Just the man we wanted to see. We're planning a surprise for the house. Something big. Can't wait, I said, matching his fake enthusiasm. What kind of surprise? Elena quickly gathered the papers. If we told you, it wouldn't be a surprise. You'll find out at the family meeting. As I excused myself to shower, I glanced back and saw Richard giving Greg a significant look. Something was definitely happening at that meeting, something they thought I couldn't stop. That night, I finalized my own preparations. I organized all the evidence, backed up the camera footage to a secure cloud server, and prepared a detailed timeline of events with Stuart. I wrote out exactly what I would say and do when the moment came. By morning, I was ready. The pieces were in place. The trap was set. All that remained was to spring it at exactly the right moment, when they thought they had won, when their guard was completely down. They wanted to play family games? Fine. But they were about to learn that some games have unexpected consequences. The day of the family meeting arrived with an atmosphere of barely contained excitement from Elena and her family. They moved around the house with nervous energy, exchanging meaningful glances and whispered conversations that stopped whenever I entered a room. Richard spent the morning on the phone, his voice hushed but triumphant. Vivian cleaned the house obsessively, as if preparing for a celebration. Greg simply smirked every time our paths crossed. For my part, I maintained the same oblivious demeanor I'd perfected over the past weeks. I offered to pick up wine for dinner. I asked innocently if I should dress up for this special occasion. I even suggested inviting neighbors, which Elena quickly shot down. "This is just for family," she insisted, an edge of anticipation in her voice. "Just us." By 6 that evening, the dining room table had been transformed with our best tablecloth, the good china we never used, and candles that Elena had arranged with particular care. It looked like Thanksgiving, or perhaps a wake. In a way, it was both, the death of my marriage and their gratitude for what they thought they'd gotten away with. I arrived at the table last, carrying a manila folder tucked discreetly under my arm. No one noticed it. They were too busy passing dishes and filling wine glasses. Richard sat at the head of the table, my place, once upon a time, with Vivian to his right, Greg to his left, and Elena beside her brother. I took the only remaining seat at the opposite end, physically and symbolically separated from the family unit they had formed. "Before we begin," Richard announced, raising his glass, "I want to toast to new beginnings and family unity. These past few months have shown what's possible when family comes together." They clinked glasses enthusiastically. I raised mine in acknowledgement but didn't drink. Richard cleared his throat. "Now, as you all know, we called this meeting to discuss some changes. Good changes." He looked at me directly. "Mark, you've been accommodating during our stay. More than accommodating. And we appreciate that. Happy to help family," I replied, the irony thick in my voice. No one seemed to notice. "The thing is," Richard continued, "we've been discussing the future. Our future as a family. And we've come to a decision that we think benefits everyone." Elena jumped in, her words rushing out. "What Dad's trying to say is that we think it makes sense for you to move on, Mark. Start fresh somewhere else." I blinked, feigning confusion. "Move on? From my house?" "That's just it," Greg said with a smug smile. "It's not really yours anymore. Not technically." Richard shot him a warning look before turning back to me with a practiced expression of concern. "What my son is trying to say, rather poorly, is that we've restructured things. For tax purposes, you understand. The house has been transferred to Greg's name, but don't worry, you'll be fairly compensated." "Compensated?" I repeated flatly. $20,000, Vivian said proudly, as if announcing I'd won a prize. "Enough for a nice apartment deposit and moving expenses. We're not monsters, Mark." I looked at each of their faces, taking in their absolute confidence, their certainty that I would simply accept this outrageous proposal. When my gaze finally landed on Elena, she at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "It's for the best," she said softly. "My parents need the stability in retirement. Greg needs to establish himself. And you and I," she hesitated, "we want different things. This way, everyone gets what they need. Everyone except me," I pointed out. Richard waved his hand dismissively. "You're young. You can start over. We're giving you a clean break here." I nodded slowly, as if considering their words. Then I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I need to step out for a moment," I said, "to process all this. But before I go, I left something for you on the table." I slid the manila folder toward the center of the dining table. Richard frowned but reached for it. As he opened it, I walked toward the front door, counting silently in my head. 1, 2, 3. What the hell is this? Richard's voice cracked like thunder behind me. I turned around, leaning against the doorframe with a calmness I didn't entirely feel. That, Richard, is a formal criminal complaint for fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to defraud a homeowner. I filed it this morning. The color drained from his face as he flipped through the pages. Vivian craned her neck to see, while Greg sat frozen, his usual smirk replaced by widening eyes. You can't prove anything, Greg finally sputtered. The second page is a certification from the county clerk's office, officially denying your fraudulent transfer request. I continued, as if he hadn't spoken. The third page is a restraining order against all of you, excluding Elena for now. And the fourth, I smiled thinly, is a notice giving you exactly 48 hours to vacate my property before I pursue court-ordered eviction and additional criminal charges. The silence was absolute. Even the sound of breathing seemed to have stopped. Elena stood up shakily. Mark, we can explain. The cameras I installed 3 weeks ago already explained everything. I cut her off. Every conversation, every document, every step of your plan. My lawyer has the footage, as do the police. Richard suddenly found his voice. Now wait just a minute. We're family. We can work this out. We're not family, I said quietly. Family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't forge signatures or file fraudulent documents. Family doesn't try to leave someone homeless for their own gain. I straightened up and looked each of them in the eye, saving Elena for last. In her face, I finally saw understanding and fear. You have 48 hours, I repeated. I'll be staying elsewhere until then. When I return, I expect the house to be exactly as it was before you all arrived, minus anything that belonged to me which you've already taken. That I'll deal with in the civil lawsuit to follow. I turned to leave, then paused, looking back one final time. One more thing. The locks will be changed in exactly 49 hours. Anything left inside becomes my property by abandonment. I suggest you start packing. With that, I walked out the front door of my house, leaving behind a tableau of shocked faces and shattered schemes. For the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. They had tried to take everything from me. Instead, they had lost everything themselves. I spent those 48 hours in a hotel downtown, my phone silenced except for calls from Stuart. They came in waves, first angry voicemails from Richard, then tearful pleas from Elena, and finally terse messages from Greg asking if we could work something out. I listened to each one, documenting them as further evidence, but never responded. Stuart called with updates twice. They tried to challenge the eviction notice, he reported on the first day. Judge took one look at the evidence and denied their request. They're definitely leaving. On the second day, Elena filed a petition for emergency spousal support. Claims you cut her off financially without warning. Did she mention the fraud? I asked. Surprisingly, no. The petition was withdrawn 2 hours after filing. I'm guessing her lawyer advised her that bringing up financial matters right now would open the door to discussing the attempted property theft. When the 48-hour mark arrived, I drove back to my house with a locksmith and 2 police officers Stuart had arranged as a precaution. The driveway was empty, the windows dark. For a moment, I hesitated before inserting my key, suddenly uncertain what I would find inside. The house was silent, with that particular emptiness that comes after people have hastily departed. They had taken most of their belongings, but the evidence of their occupation remained. Nail holes in walls where they'd hung their pictures, scuff marks on the hardwood, a lingering scent of Vivian's perfume in the hallway. My home office had been stripped bare, the fold-up bed gone but my desk still missing. The kitchen cabinets stood open and half empty. They'd taken dishes that weren't theirs. The master bedroom was in disarray, drawers left open, closet doors ajar. But they were gone. And that was what mattered. The locksmith changed every lock while the officers documented the condition of the house for my ongoing legal case. When they finally left, I stood alone in my living room, victory feeling strangely hollow. I had won, yes, but I had also lost the future I'd once imagined. Time to rebuild, I whispered to myself. And rebuild I did. Over the next 6 months, I reclaimed my space inch by inch. I repainted every room, choosing colors I'd always wanted but Elena had vetoed. I replaced the furniture they'd damaged or taken. I converted the guest bedroom, the one Richard and Vivian had occupied, into a home gym. The divorce proceedings were surprisingly straightforward. Elena didn't contest anything once her lawyer saw the evidence of fraud. In the end, she signed away any claim to the house in exchange for me dropping the criminal charges against her, though not against her family. Her last text to me was brief. "I'm sorry. I got caught up in what they wanted. I never should have betrayed you." I didn't respond. Some betrayals can't be forgiven with a text message apology. Richard and Greg weren't so lucky. They both pled guilty to reduced charges, fraud and attempted property theft, in exchange for probation and restitution. The local paper ran a small story about the case, which caught the attention of a paralegal who worked for a property law firm. "This happens more often than people realize," she told me over coffee. "Family fraud is one of the most underreported crimes because victims are too embarrassed to come forward." Her words stuck with me. How many others had faced what I had, perhaps without the resources or knowledge to fight back? The thought kept me awake at night, until finally I decided to do something about it. I converted my home office, now restored and upgraded, into a recording studio of sorts. Using my experience and the detailed notes from my case, I created a series of online videos about protecting your property from family fraud. Because family doesn't always mean safety, became my tagline. The channel grew quickly. Soon I was receiving messages from people in similar situations, seeking advice. With Stuart's guidance, I was careful not to practice law without a license, instead focusing on general education and awareness. 6 months after launching the channel, I hired a part-time assistant to help manage the growing community. 3 months after that, a small legal publisher approached me about writing a guidebook for homeowners. As for Elena and her family, I heard snippets through mutual acquaintances. They had indeed moved into a one-bedroom apartment, all 4 of them. Richard and Vivian's house had been foreclosed upon months before they ever came to stay with us. Their financial troubles had been far worse than Elena had admitted. Greg had been evicted from 3 different apartments before targeting my house. They had seen me as the solution to their self-created problems. 1 year to the day after the family meeting, I hosted a different kind of gathering, the first in-person workshop for my new legal education initiative, held in what had once been Greg's bedroom and was now a sleek meeting space. 24 homeowners attended, each with their own stories of family members who had tried to take advantage. "The most important thing to remember," I told them as we concluded, "is that you are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. Generosity is wonderful, but not at the cost of your own security." That evening, after everyone had left, I walked through my house, truly mine again in every sense. The walls now held degrees and certifications instead of family photos. The spare bedroom housed students instead of scheming relatives. The kitchen hosted cooking classes rather than tense family dinners. I had lost a wife and an illusion of family. But in return, I had gained purpose, community, and a deeper understanding of both legal protection and personal boundaries. Sometimes I reflected as I stood in my doorway, looking out at the neighborhood I had fought to remain part of. The best revenge isn't just living well, it's helping others live well too, safe in homes that truly belong to them. Because your home isn't just where you live. It's where you have the right to feel secure. And no one, not even family, should be able to take that away.